Hello everyone, welcome to Taking Care of Business. Today on the show, I'm joined by Jambu Palaniappan, CEO of Checkatrade, one of the UK's leading marketplace platforms for home improvement. He also serves on the boards of Monzo and Just Eat. Prior to joining Checkatrade, Jambu was one of Uber's earliest employees, heading up Uber and Uber Eats across EMEA during a pivotal time of growth. He later joined Omers Ventures, heading up Europe and working with some of the continent's most ambitious technology businesses. So, Jambu, it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on the program.
It's a pleasure. And I mean, if anybody is qualified to explain and teach us how to take care of business, it is obviously you. So, yeah, really excited to find out everything, really, that you can, give your opinion on scaling and growing businesses. So, yeah, thank you so
Sure,
much.
Of course, we'll do my best.
So, having worked across high growth platforms and serving on boards, what principles have consistently guided your approach to scaling and growing businesses?
The number one principle that I think about that is common across the growth platforms and companies that I've worked with is actually a personality characteristic of the leaders of those companies and the employees who are really successful at those companies. It is comfort with ambiguity. And I think the reason that's important is in growth companies and in technology businesses at large, the answers are still being sought, and there's no playbook. Part of the reason these companies exist is you are building that playbook and ecosystem to really bring a better customer experience and almost create a new industry. And if you think about some of the companies that I've been really fortunate to work in, the industries around them when they started were nascent or non-existent, right? I went to South Africa to start Uber, and I remember explaining the principle of Uber to people in Johannesburg. Find a car on your phone and get into a stranger's car, and it will take you where you want to go. And people looked at me like I was crazy. But if you think about how technology can improve customer experience, those principles have really driven, those companies to create their own industries. And I think the characteristic of the individuals who were successful at those companies that was most important is being comfortable with that ambiguity.
Do you know what? I remember when I first heard about Uber, I was in Camden in a night out, and I was with my adult niece, and we were going to go to a different part of London, and she said, "Oh, let's not bother with the taxi. We can get an Uber and get an exec car and go into town." And I was just like, okay, wow, that's really cool. We can just order a really cool, shiny executive car and being taken into, central London. So I do actually remember where I was and what I was doing the first time I'd heard of Uber. But you're just talking about the customer experience as well. Beyond ratings and reviews, what builds trust in marketplaces?
This has been a really common theme of my career across many of the businesses that I've worked in. And if I take a step back on my motivation for joining Checkatrade 3 years ago, it was really around the trust signals and investment that Checkatrade had made and were at its core. The founding story of the company is really amazing. A tornado tore through a town in West Sussex, and the town was infiltrated by rogue traders. And Checkatrade's kind of creation story is a leaflet of vetted, trusted trades who could do quality work. And if you think about who we are now, nearly 30 years later, as the internet has evolved, those principles still hold true to who we are. And the core principle that I've seen, both at Checkatrade and broader marketplaces, is the investment in trust signals creates better customer experience. And it creates better customer experience because both the consumers and, in our case, the trades are more likely to complete work on the platform because of that trust, credentialing, and investment. So in our case now, trades go through up to 12 checks before they're permitted onto the platform. And what that means is that consumers have a higher trust signal that their job is more likely to be completed by a high-quality trade. And those principles lead to the most important principle in marketplaces, which is network effects. And those network effects of the platform actually becoming more effective as the platform gets bigger and more trusted to create an even better and defensible customer experience is what allows our business to deliver more value to customers. And that's a very similar principle to the ones I learned at Uber, where the shorter the wait time for a car was, the more likely you were to order, or Uber Eats, where the shorter the delivery time and the broader the restaurant selection was, the more likely you were to come back. And I think that's a really powerful principle.
Yeah, agreed. So in marketplace businesses, what often goes wrong when businesses are trying to scale?
I think the way that I think about what is required for a marketplace to be successful is really two simple things. One is what is the value that you can provide to customers by building a marketplace and going deeper into the customer value chain or the supply value chain or the transaction or the payment. And can you use that to create a more defensible, trusted platform? And I think what I find goes wrong is either the value of going deeper in the transaction is not commensurate with the cost of doing that. So, there were a lot of businesses that tried, rental marketplaces in the past. So you had an expensive DSLR camera. You only used it one day a month. Could you rent it out the 29 other days and make some, money on the side? And the challenge there was, the products got damaged, right? And so the trust signals were low, and the frequency in which someone was prepared to actually put that camera on that rental marketplace was really low. So you had low liquidity, and therefore you had a low likelihood that you would actually have your request completed. Created a bad customer experience. I think the second mistake that I see across a lot of marketplaces when they fail is they expand too quickly, either geographically into second cities or countries, or horizontally into other sectors. And they think that expansion is actually the answer to solving that first liquidity problem, when in fact it actually makes it worse because you're distributing your focus, resource, and supply across a much larger geographical area and actually reducing the likelihood that someone is matched. So I think those are the two principles that I find most often to be the case of why things go wrong.
Yeah, it makes me think of quality over quantity. And just going back to your first point, if you are renting out your, very expensive camera, I think that you have got to be providing, quality, make sure it works all the time, making sure you're working with quality consumers who are going to treat it well as well. So I think that principle hits there. And again, you're talking about expansion, and again, it has to be a quality move and really mean something for the company instead of doing it just because you think it's the right thing to do.
That's right. I think one of the other ways I think about it is oftentimes people expand because they're running away from something. It's not going well. They think expansion is the answer.
Yeah.
And I gave a talk a couple of years ago and called it the first rule of international expansion. And the first rule is don't do it. And I think that's a simple way to think about that framing, which is, have you actually proven something before you go and expand into your second country? Or are you running away from something?
That's a really interesting view. So having headed up Uber and Uber Eats in an immensely pivotal period, and now, of course, being CEO for Checkatrade, what has surprised you most about the differences between scaling a platform like Uber and scaling a platform like Checkatrade?
I think the commonalities that I've seen are one, an exceptionally passionate group of employees, people who love the customers, love the problems we're trying to solve. The trade sector is super interesting because it touches us all, right? And it's massive, employs over 2 million people in Britain, and is growing in demand and needs as we think about things like the green energy transition and improving the energy efficiency of all of our homes. That inspiration and motivation, I think, is a really common principle, and I'm super proud of our team for all of the effort that they've put into improving the products and customer experience and their ambition that comes from that. I think the other piece that's really been common has been the investment in technology, and technology as a driver of improvement of that customer experience. And I think that's only been magnified now with the AI wave, where the opportunities to build better products are at all of our fingertips. I think, for me, the expectations of us at Checkatrade are also really different, because our ambition is to be really deeper in our customers' workflows as well. So, for example, we've built a product called Trade More, which is a software product that allows trades to run their business on their mobile phone, independent of if they're running their Checkatrade part of their business or not. And being able to go deeper has also been really fascinating. That's quite different to what we did at Uber and Uber Eats, where we were one channel, for customers or drivers or restaurants. And that depth of experience and offering has been really fascinating.
Wow. So in high growth businesses, what is the hardest thing to maintain as the business scales? And how have you seen successful companies protect that?
I think the two most important things for me that I think are required to be protected are, one, what is the culture and scrappiness that you've built to get you there, and how do you make sure as you scale you don't lose that? And I think there are some really tactical ways that I've seen great businesses, founders, and companies do that. The number one thing is really depth of time with their customers, right? In our case, that's both consumers and trades businesses. But making sure that you've got that continual touch point of, are you really focused on what matters? Are you tight enough in the feedback loop to alter that based on what you're hearing? And are you clear enough on focus, right? And the few things that will really move the needle. I think the second principle for me is, right now we are at an age where the capital requirements and tools to build a company are changing faster than ever. You can build really meaningful businesses from the start faster than ever possible. And so I think the second thing I've learned is, just because your company is getting bigger, how do you retain the things that made it great? And you don't lose that just because you're getting bigger, scaling more. I think that principle of what is the ethos of the business? What is the ethos of the leadership team? And how do you make sure that stays true? And you don't sort of over-engineer, over-complicate, over-subscribe. I think that's a trap I see a lot of folks get in, right? There's this principle that as you scale, either as a leader or as a company, that means you have to be more strategic, be more visionary, be out of the detail. And I actually, in my experience, I found that to be the detail point in particular to be the opposite of truth. That actually, if you get out of the detail, that's when things go wrong. Mm-hmm. And the great leaders are the ones that I've worked with, I've been really fortunate to work with, are the ones who know when you need to get in the detail and why that matters.
I love it when I hear people say everything matters in the detail. It's the detail that really matters. I've read a couple of Tim Grover books, and he often talks about when he's been training Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. He says, "Don't sweat this." Or sweat the small stuff, sorry. And it's right, that's really important, because it's all the small stuff that adds up to the big stuff. And there are people out there and companies that sweat the small stuff and the big stuff, obviously. And I think in order to stay great and champion your business, you have to take care of all of it. But how do you also go about finding the right employees in order to when making sure that your company stays scrappy and stays true to its ethos?
The two really key principles I look for are, one, in the interview process, we really simulate what doing the job is like. We give people information about the job that they're going to do and ask for them to come back with a viewpoint about how they would actually do it. It's not just behavioral, it's practical, it's cases around that problem. And what I find is that really separates the people who are good at interviewing from really good at doing the job. And we do that for all roles, whether that's an operational role, technical role, a role in our legal team. And then the second principle that I find is really important is, are they close to the customer problem and detail, right? Because I think if folks, particularly at senior levels, envisage their role as, diplomat and visionary, that oftentimes can come at the cost of that customer centricity and that detail. And being close to that matters a lot in a mid-sized company that's growing. And for me, those are two really key principles I look for. From a leadership perspective, I also really look for self-awareness, humility, and a really curious and learning mindset. We all don't know everything, right? And anybody who pretends to is probably covering for something else. So I really look for people who are curious and learning.
Okay, so this leads quite nicely on to my next question, I suppose. What, in your opinion, should founders and operators of marketplace platforms be paying closer attention to?
I think for me, the really interesting kind of dynamic that's happening with marketplaces at the moment is, what is the role of marketplaces in a world where the way consumers discover products is different because of increasing use of LLMs, AI search, etc. And I think there is a huge opportunity to really help go deeper in the transaction and facilitate better customer experience across the board, right? And I think that the next wave of marketplace businesses is going to have to dramatically improve customer experience, not just have perfect inventory or not just have pricing capture to drive growth, because I think some of those customer experiences are still not great. And I think we can all look ourselves in the mirror and ask, what would it take to improve them? And I think if we can do that, that's really durable, consistent growth advantage. And we've been really fortunate to, launch and build some amazing products at Checkatrade over the last couple of years that have really proven that. But I think no one can rest on their laurels, no matter how established, large, profitable their businesses are, because that rate of change is happening so fast.
Yeah. So now, drawing on your experience on the boards of both Monzo and Just Eat, what do you think matters the most when overseeing fast-scaling businesses?
I think I've been really, really fortunate over the last 8 years to be on a variety of different boards, both public and private, the ones that you mentioned, but also as a venture capitalist on several of the boards of companies that I had invested in with some amazing entrepreneurs and founders. My experience and maybe the principles that I approach things with are pretty simple. One, board members and boards themselves have to remember their role. We're not, the main character in the film, right? And I think that's a really important principle. The second thing, have been fortunate now to be on both sides of the table and have really benefited from this in many ways, is I almost wish boards were harder on companies and founders when things were going well, and easier on companies and founders when things were not going well. I think it's easy to do the opposite. And I think we can only improve if we have a really trusted circle of feedback. And I think the third thing is, for me, is I think as a CEO now and the founders I've seen who have really thrived, they also know how to get the most out of their boards, how to really go deep on the topics that are relevant. When there are independent members of the board, really make sure that they have the right mix of individuals for the skills and challenges their companies are going to face, not right now, but over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, and to really use that network and effectiveness to drive growth. I think it's been one of the most helpful things for me in terms of learning and experience, particularly in areas like capital markets and public markets, where I personally didn't have a lot of experience before. Being on those boards, and has been also brilliant to see other founders go through the growth journeys that they've gone through.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really helpful, insightful bit of advice. Are there any systems or habits that you have introduced into your life that have meaningfully improved the way that you work?
I think two. One is professional, one is personal. On the professional side, I do Ask Me Anything sessions with all of our individual teams. And so it works out to usually one or two a week, and I go through them in rotation. And there's no agenda. I just go sit in the room with teams of usually between 10 and 15 people across either various functions or product and engineering teams or commercial teams. And I share a minute or two of thoughts on my side, and then I just answer any questions on their mind. And I find them to be really interesting because you get kind of the direct truth of what's going on in the organization. People feel like they can really speak up and share their views on things that are going well or not. Two of my favorite questions are, what are you most proud of? And if you had a magic wand, what would you change? And it really, incites amazing passion and responses. And I really, really value that. I think it's one of the highest impact things that I do internally, and I do it with our customers as well. And that's great, and never shy about telling me where we're doing well and certainly where we can improve. So I love doing that, and I find that it's a really important way of being in touch with an organization. On the personal side, I think two habits that have really helped me through a very intense, 3 years now as CEO of Checkatrade. One is I'm pretty religious about fitness and the gym, and it's early in the morning for me. It's usually about 5:15, and it is. I can almost, if I were to chart it, I can almost chart it directly between the relationship between keeping that cadenced, 4 or 5 days a week and my mood overall. And that's really critical. And then the second thing is I have young children, and I always pick my daughter up from school on Fridays and take her home, and then we'll wrap up work remotely at home. And I find that to be really, really amazing. And that kind of 15-minute walk back from school on Fridays is one of the things that I look forward to the most in life. And, I think helpful to always remember that, there's a reason we're all doing this.
Yeah, thank you. That is lovely. I'm with you with the fitness. If I don't do a morning workout, then it creates a knock-on effect on my mood more than anything. I would say more than my work. And I can imagine having that time, picking up your daughter, just stepping away from everything and having one-on-one time that she'd remember forever. That must be just so uplifting. And as you said, it's a reminder of why you work so hard and why we are all here, I suppose. What does taking care of business mean to you?
I think for me, we are all, I feel very, very privileged to be able to do this job that I do. We have an amazing team, amazing customers, playing a really, really pivotal role in one of Britain's most important industries. And I think of myself as a steward, right? And I think my job is to do the best that I can to leave this company in a better place for its future. And I'm super privileged to have that opportunity and very, very lucky and grateful to do that. And I think that is an important thing to keep in mind, right? When you have tough days or challenging days. I work with an executive coach, and one of his lines that really sticks with me is it's never quite as good as you think it is, and it's never quite as bad as you think it is. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind for us all, when we have those challenging moments. And I think for me, again, I just feel an immense amount of gratitude and privilege to be to be able to lead this company.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on to Taking Care of Business. It has been a privilege speaking to you and learning about how you build and scale high growth platforms. So yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in to another episode of Taking Care of Business, and we'll see you back again here next time.